The relentless rhythm of the rain against the window pane felt like a heavy heartbeat echoing through the silent, dimly lit living room. Mark sat motionless on the plush light grey rug, the cold, dark hardwood seeping through his worn-out comfortable flannel shirt. Beneath his trembling hand lay Buster, no longer the chaotic force of nature, but a frail shadow resting heavily on the floor. The steady, shallow rise and fall of Buster's chest was the only anchor keeping Mark tethered to the present crushing moment. He gently stroked the dull golden coat, his fingers catching on the stark white and grey hairs that masked the dog's muzzle. Buster's cloudy, tired brown eyes briefly flickered open, seeking Mark's familiar face in the soft, melancholic shadows of the quiet room. A single warm lamp cast a gentle chiaroscuro effect across them, highlighting the profound exhaustion etched into both of their aging faces. Mark swallowed the thick lump in his throat, tracing the faded scar behind Buster's ear, a silent testament to their wild adventures. Every raspy exhale from the elderly yellow Labrador felt like a ticking clock, counting down the precious few seconds they had left. He leaned in closer, resting his forehead against Buster's warm brow, letting his tears soak silently into the soft, graying fur. The house, usually vibrant and echoing with the laughter of children, was now suffocatingly quiet, holding its breath for the inevitable goodbye. Buster let out a low, comforting sigh, leaning his heavy head deeper into Mark's open palm as if trying to soothe him. Mark's mind desperately fought against the reality of the room, begging for just one more day, one more walk, one more moment. But the fragility of the massive frame beneath his hands told a different story, one of a long journey reaching its end. He whispered soft, soothing words into the floppy ears, his voice cracking under the crushing weight of a beautiful 13-year bond. The storm outside raged on, a stark contrast to the profound, heavy stillness that enveloped the two lifelong companions on the floor. Buster's tail, which once possessed the power to clear a coffee table in seconds, gave a faint, singular thump against the rug. That tiny movement shattered Mark's remaining composure, opening the floodgates to a torrent of bittersweet memories rushing back into his mind. Looking into those cloudy eyes, the dim room faded away, replaced by the brilliant sunshine of a coastal afternoon over a decade ago. The journey of a lifetime was flashing before his eyes, beginning with the day a tiny, chaotic clearance sale puppy finally chose them. The memory began with Emily's radiant, youthful smile, back when their biggest worry was the quiet emptiness echoing through their coastal home. She had been yearning for a child, a silent ache that prompted Mark to hatch a wild, unconventional idea to fill the void. He thought a puppy might be the perfect test run for parenthood, a chaotic little heartbeat to bring life into their spotless living room. At the local breeder, elegant, well-behaved puppies were priced at a premium, sitting calmly and showing off their impeccable pedigrees. But then there was a separate pen, where a single, hyperactive ball of golden fur was wildly throwing himself against the wire mesh. The breeder sighed, explaining that this particular pup was the clearance sale special, heavily discounted to just $250. Mark knelt down, and before he could even say hello, the puppy launched forward, furiously licking his face and gnawing on his shoelaces. Emily's bright blue eyes immediately softened, her heart melting as she watched the clumsy creature tumble over its own oversized paws. They hadn't chosen the heavily discounted dog. Rather, the clearance sale puppy had overwhelmingly and decisively chosen them. The ride back to their sunny home was pure chaos, with the tiny puppy refusing to sit still, whining and climbing all over the seats. Mark turned up the car radio to drown out the noise, and a lively upbeat song by a rock band blared through the speakers. The puppy immediately stopped whining, tilting his floppy ears toward the music with a look of pure, comical fascination. "Look at him," Emily laughed, brushing a stray blonde wave behind her ear. "I think we should call him Buster." And just like that, Buster officially became part of the family, a tiny, adorable hurricane unleashed upon their peaceful lives. That very first night, Mark optimistically set up a cozy cardboard box in the corner of the room, expecting Buster to sleep peacefully. Instead, the sunlit coastal home echoed with high-pitched, lonely howls the moment the lights went out. Defeated but secretly thrilled, Mark scooped the shivering puppy up and placed him right in the middle of their warm bed. Buster immediately curled into a tight, golden ball between them, letting out a satisfied sigh as he drifted off to sleep. Mark woke up the next morning to find his favorite pillow chewed open, stuffing scattered across the light oak hardwood floor like fresh snow. It was the absolute beginning of a beautiful disaster, and neither Mark nor Emily would have traded it for the world. In what felt like the blink of an eye, the clumsy clearance puppy had ballooned into a massive, heavy-built adult Labrador. Buster's energy was boundless. His thick tail, a dangerous weapon that routinely cleared coffee tables and sent magazines flying across the room. He was a walking vacuum cleaner, devoid of any table manners or understanding of personal boundaries. Mark vividly remembered the day he spilled a fresh bag of dog food onto the coastal home's light oak floor. By the time he turned around with a broom, Buster had inhaled the entire mountain of kibble without chewing a single piece. "Where do you even put it all?" Mark had muttered in disbelief, while Buster simply burped and gave a happy, hyperactive pant. But beneath the comedic gluttony lay a deep, irrational fear that would occasionally turn the giant dog into a panicked wreck. Buster was utterly terrified of thunderstorms, a fact they learned the hard way when Emily returned from a short business trip. Fearing the dog would destroy the house, Mark had left Buster safely in the attached garage during a sudden afternoon downpour. When Emily opened the garage door, her bright blue eyes widened in sheer horror at the devastation before her. The neat, organized space looked as though a small explosive had gone off. Tools were scattered, and paint cans were tipped over. Worse, in his frantic attempt to escape the thunder, Buster had literally chewed 3 massive, jagged holes straight through the drywall. The large, muscular adult Labrador was cowering in the corner, shaking violently, his dark brown eyes wide with terror. Mark arrived moments later, breathless and ready to apologize, expecting Emily to finally declare that the dog was too much to handle. Instead, she didn't yell or complain about the ruined walls or the immense cost of the upcoming repairs. Emily simply walked past the debris, dropping to her knees on the cold concrete to wrap her arms around the trembling giant. "Oh, Buster, you were so scared, weren't you?" she whispered, burying her face into his thick, shiny golden coat. Buster immediately pressed his heavy frame into her embrace, seeking safety in the warmth of her pastel cardigan. Watching them, Mark realized that they weren't just putting up with a bad dog, they were learning to love a profoundly imperfect creature. That shared acceptance became a quiet glue, binding the couple closer together as they navigated the beautiful chaos of their lives. Life in their sunny coastal home eventually settled into a joyful rhythm, especially on the day Emily discovered she was finally pregnant. The sheer overwhelming happiness radiated from her bright blue eyes, filling every corner of the house with an infectious, beautiful warmth. Mark felt a mixture of profound excitement and terrifying anxiety at the prospect of becoming a father for the very first time. Wanting to celebrate this monumental milestone, he decided to surprise his radiant wife with a carefully chosen, shimmering gold necklace. He presented the velvet box in the sunlit living room, watching Emily's face light up with pure delight as she saw the jewelry. "Oh Mark, it is absolutely gorgeous," she whispered, her fingers gently brushing the delicate gold chain resting against the white satin interior. Their perfect, romantic moment was abruptly shattered by a suspicious, heavy gulping sound coming from the edge of the light oak hardwood floor. Mark turned his head just in time to see the large golden Labrador licking his chops with an incredibly guilty, hyperactive expression. The delicate gold necklace had vanished from the table, swallowed whole by the furry, 4-legged vacuum cleaner sitting innocently beside them. Panic and sheer disbelief washed over Mark's face as he realized the incredibly expensive gift was now resting inside the dog's stomach. What followed was a highly undignified, multi-day stakeout in the backyard, waiting for nature to inevitably take its course with the heavy dog. Mark spent hours pacing the green grass, armed with a garden hose and a profound sense of utter, miserable defeat. Buster, completely unaware of the financial crisis he had caused, happily bounded around the yard, playfully chewing on a fallen mango. When the fateful moment finally arrived, Mark had to carefully wash down the lawn to retrieve the surprisingly shiny gold chain. He held the reclaimed jewelry up to the bright sunlight, shaking his head, while Buster sat proudly beside his chaotic masterpiece. Despite the utter absurdity of the situation, Mark couldn't help but laugh out loud at the ridiculous reality of their shared life. Emily washed the necklace thoroughly, wearing it as a hilarious badge of honor and a testament to their dog's legendary, bottomless appetite. Buster simply wagged his thick tail, oblivious to the trouble, happy just to be included in whatever strange game his humans were playing. The golden necklace incident became one of their favorite stories to tell, a bright memory of laughter before the darkest storm arrived. They had no idea that their chaotic, gluttonous dog was about to become the most vital emotional pillar of their crumbling world. The sunny atmosphere of their coastal home vanished entirely on the day they went in for what was supposed to be a routine ultrasound. The doctor's face fell into a grim, unreadable mask as she stared closely at the monitor, a heavy silence filling the sterile room. Emily's bright smile faded instantly, replaced by a suffocating dread as the doctor softly delivered the devastating news that the heartbeat was gone. The drive back to their house was agonizingly quiet, the air inside the car thick with an unspoken, paralyzing wave of profound grief. Emily rested her forehead against the cold passenger window, her bright blue eyes now vacant as she watched the suburban trees blur past. Mark gripped the steering wheel until his knuckles turned white, fighting back his own tears to be a strong anchor for his wife. When they finally stepped through the front door, the once vibrant coastal home felt hollow, echoing with the heartbreaking reality of their loss. Mark gently suggested they take a vacation to clear their heads, desperately trying to find any words to bridge the widening, sorrowful gap. Getting no response, he turned to walk into the living room, only to freeze entirely at the unexpectedly quiet scene unfolding before him. Buster, the hyperactive giant, who usually destroyed everything in his path, was exhibiting an eerie, completely uncharacteristic level of absolute stillness. The large, muscular Labrador was sitting solemnly on the light oak hardwood floor right beside Emily, who was weeping silently on the sofa. Without any command or training, Buster gently rested his heavy golden head directly onto Emily's lap, letting out a soft, empathetic sigh. He did not nudge her for attention or wag his thick tail. He simply offered his warm, solid presence in her darkest hour. Emily slowly buried her face into his thick, shiny coat, her shoulders shaking violently as she finally released the agonizing weight of her sorrow. Mark stood quietly in the doorway, his heart breaking and swelling simultaneously as he watched the chaotic dog become a perfect, silent guardian. In that profound moment, 1,000 clumsy mistakes and chewed-up walls were instantly forgiven and entirely forgotten by the grieving young couple. Buster seemed to understand the fragility of the human heart, absorbing her tears into his golden fur without asking for anything in return. It was the first time Mark truly realized that beneath the endless energy lay a deeply soulful creature intimately connected to their emotions. The silent companionship Buster offered was far more soothing than any well-intentioned words Mark could have ever spoken to his devastated wife. The heavy clouds of grief remained, but knowing they had this steadfast, furry protector by their side made the burden slightly easier to carry. Months slowly turned into years, and the heavy clouds of grief eventually parted to reveal a beautiful, radiant new sunrise for the couple. Emily's bright blue eyes sparkled with joyful tears once again as they brought home their very first child, a beautiful baby boy named Leo. Mark carried the fragile infant through the front door of their coastal home, his heart pounding with equal parts overwhelming love and deep anxiety. He remembered the chewed-up walls and the swallowed necklace, terrified of how the chaotic, hyperactive giant dog would react to a tiny baby. Buster stood in the center of the living room, his thick golden tail freezing mid-wag as he noticed the small bundle in Mark's arms. The large, muscular Labrador didn't jump or bark. Instead, he lowered his heavy head and approached with a slow, astonishingly gentle caution. Mark knelt down on the light oak hardwood floor, holding his breath, as Buster leaned in to take a long, deep sniff of the newborn. In that magical moment, the wild energy melted away, and Buster gently licked the baby's tiny foot, instantly accepting his new, lifelong duty. The clearance sale puppy had officially transformed into a fiercely loyal, overprotective nanny, refusing to leave the baby's side for even a second. As the years flew by, their vibrant home grew even louder with the arrival of their second son, Sam, and finally their youngest daughter, Lily. The house was a beautiful, chaotic mess of scattered toys, spilled juice, and the constant, rhythmic thumping of Buster's heavy tail against the floor. Buster absorbed the chaotic energy of the three children with infinite patience, acting as a furry jungle gym and a giant, golden pillow. Mark would often watch from the doorway as 5-year-old Lily, in her light pink dress, gently tugged on Buster's oversized floppy ears. The massive dog simply closed his warm brown eyes and let out a soft sigh, perfectly content to be manhandled by the little girl. 10-year-old Leo and 7-year-old Sam would wrestle on the plush rug, and Buster was always right in the middle, happily refereeing the match. Whenever a child cried, Buster was the first responder, rushing over to offer a comforting nudge or a generous, wet kiss on the cheek. At night, the loyal guardian would patrol the hallway, eventually settling down right outside their bedroom doors to stand his silent, steadfast watch. Mark and Emily marveled at the beautiful irony. The dog they once thought was untrainable had become the most reliable caretaker in the world. He was the invisible glue, holding their chaotic, loving family together, seamlessly blending into every single precious memory they were creating. Buster wasn't just a pet anymore. He was a true brother to Leo, Sam, and Lily, and an irreplaceable heartbeat within their bustling homeline, 121. To burn off some of that boundless energy, Mark decided to pack the whole family up for a weekend trip to the famous local dog beach. The sky was a brilliant, flawless blue, and the salty ocean breeze whipped through the open car windows, sending Buster into a frenzy of anticipation. As soon as Mark's tires hit the sandy parking lot, Buster's thick tail began thumping against the upholstery like an out-of-control metronome. Mark walked the massive, pulling dog down to the shoreline, the crashing waves masking the excited barks echoing across the sand. Looking around at the pristine beach and the open horizon, Mark smiled and reached down, gently unclipping the heavy metal leash. The moment the collar clicked, Buster realized he was completely free, and a look of pure, unadulterated madness crossed his expressive brown eyes. He didn't just run, he exploded forward like a furry, golden missile, kicking up massive clouds of white sand in his wake. Emily and the children cheered from the blanket as Buster sprinted straight into the freezing ocean, leaping wildly over the crashing surf. Other dog owners watched in awe as the hyperactive giant raced in circles, his boundless energy infecting the entire stretch of the coastline. For a glorious 10 minutes, it was absolute perfection, a picture-perfect family memory playing out under the warm, bright sun. But then, Buster abruptly stopped in the dead center of the crowded, pristine beach, his posture suddenly shifting in a very alarming way. Mark's smile vanished instantly, his hazel eyes widening in sheer horror as he realized exactly what his dog was about to do. Right in front of a horrified family having a picnic, Buster shamelessly arched his back and began to relieve his massive bowels. "No, no, no, Buster, stop!" Mark yelled, sprinting across the sand waving a tiny, entirely inadequate plastic bag in the air. It was too late. The catastrophic mess was made, ruining the beautiful scenery and drawing disgusted gasps from the surrounding beachgoers. Within minutes, a stern park ranger rolled up on an ATV, pointing a commanding finger toward the exit and officially kicking them off the beach. Mark dragged the utterly unrepentant, thoroughly happy dog back to the car, his face burning bright red with profound embarrassment. "You are the worst dog in the world," Mark groaned, burying his face in his hands while Buster simply panted happily in the back seat. Yet, as they drove away, the sheer absurdity of the disaster washed over them, and the entire family erupted into uncontrollable, roaring laughter. As the three children grew rapidly, the financial weight on Mark's shoulders grew heavier, forcing him to double his workload as a weekly columnist. His lifelong dream of becoming an investigative field reporter was indefinitely paused, buried under a mountain of exhausting late-night writing sessions. Mark would often sit in his parked car long after returning home, stealing a few minutes of silent peace before facing the chaos inside. Inside the house, Emily was equally overwhelmed, managing 3 energetic kids while the house constantly descended into a messy, chaotic battlefield. The breaking point arrived on a particularly exhausting evening, when Emily had finally managed to rock the 2 youngest children to sleep. Hearing Mark's car pull into the driveway, Buster leaped up and sprinted excitedly through the house, barking loudly and waking the sleeping babies. The shrill cries of the infants pierced the air, and a sleep-deprived Emily completely snapped, her patience shattering into a million pieces. She screamed in pure frustration, declaring that Buster was a ruined, disobedient disaster, and demanding that Mark take him away immediately. Mark fired back, his own suppressed stress boiling over, accusing her of wanting to throw away anything that became slightly difficult. A vicious, tearful argument erupted in the living room, the beautiful coastal home now echoing with harsh, unforgiving words born of sheer exhaustion. With a heavy heart, Mark clipped the leash onto a confused Buster and drove him to a friend's house for a temporary separation. The house was finally quiet, but the silence was suffocating, a miserable void that made Emily instantly regret her anger. When Mark returned, they sat on the sofa, apologizing through tears and realizing that the dog wasn't the enemy. Their shared stress was. Emily held Mark's hands, gently urging him to stop hiding in his car and to finally pursue his abandoned dream of being a reporter. "We aren't old yet, Mark," she whispered softly, her bright blue eyes shining with a renewed, fierce determination to change their lives. Empowered by her unwavering support, Mark officially quit his comfortable columnist job, ready to take a massive risk for his family's future. they decided to leave the crowded, expensive coastal city behind, searching for a slower, more meaningful pace of life in the mountains. Buster was brought back home, his furiously wagging tail acting as the perfect, joyful peace treaty for the exhausted couple. Packing their entire lives into cardboard boxes, the family bid a tearful farewell to the sunlit floors that held so many wild memories. They drove toward the horizon, trading the salty ocean breeze for the crisp, cold air of a quiet, snowy suburban town. The transition to the snowy suburban brick house was exactly what the family needed to heal and grow closer together. With Mark successfully working as a reporter and Emily managing the beautiful new home, the heavy stress of the past finally melted away. The dark walnut hardwood floors of their new living room quickly became the stage for cozy winter nights by the crackling stone fireplace. Buster fully embraced the colder climate, joyfully plunging headfirst into deep snowbanks alongside Leo, Sam, and Lily. But as the peaceful years rolled by in their suburban sanctuary, the cruel, unstoppable march of time began to show its mark. Mark noticed the first signs when the large, muscular dog struggled slightly to climb the wooden stairs to the children's bedrooms. Buster's once vibrant, thick golden coat began to dull, and a distinct ring of stark white and gray hairs appeared around his muzzle. His boundless, hyperactive energy slowly faded, replaced by long, heavy naps on the plush-like gray rug near the warmth of the fire. He was no longer the chaotic tornado that destroyed garages. He had become an elderly, frail shadow of his former magnificent self. The true severity of his age was violently exposed during a terrifying, pitch-black night when a massive thunderstorm rolled over the snowy town. Mark and Emily woke to the booming thunder, immediately rushing downstairs to comfort the dog they knew would be shaking in terror. But the living room was empty, the front door blown slightly ajar by the howling wind. Buster had panicked and fled into the storm. Panic seized Mark's chest as he grabbed a flashlight, sprinting out into the freezing, torrential rain while screaming the dog's name into the dark. After an agonizing hour of searching the neighborhood, the faint beam of his flashlight caught a heartbreaking sight near the edge of the woods. Buster was lying completely motionless beneath a large oak tree, his frail body soaked by the freezing rain and shivering violently. Mark fell to his knees in the mud, scooping the heavy, unresponsive dog into his arms and rushing him desperately to the emergency vet clinic. The sterile, bright lights of the clinic felt blinding as the veterinarian gravely examined the elderly Labrador's swollen, rigid abdomen. The diagnosis was severe stomach torsion, a highly fatal condition, and the vet warned that a dog this old had almost zero chance of surviving the night. "He's not just a normal dog," Mark pleaded, his voice cracking with tears as he gripped the stainless steel examination table. "He's a fighter." Leaving Buster behind the cold clinic doors was the hardest thing Mark had ever done, praying fiercely for one last, impossible miracle. Miraculously, the resilient old dog survived that terrible night, granting Mark and his family a precious, albeit brief, extension of time. But the fierce spark in Buster's eyes had finally dimmed, and his weary body could no longer keep pace with his boundless spirit. The flashbacks slowly faded away, pulling Mark back into the dim, quiet reality of the present moment on the living room floor. The storm outside continued to rage against the glass, while inside, the silence between Buster's shallow, labored breaths grew agonizingly long. Mark gently stroked the soft, graying fur around the dog's muzzle, feeling the incredible weight of 13 unforgettable years resting in his lap. He looked down at the frail, motionless giant, overwhelmed by a sudden, crushing wave of guilt for the moments he had lost his temper. Mark leaned his head down, pressing his trembling lips against the dog's soft, floppy ear, his voice breaking into a choked, tearful whisper. "Buster, do you remember that day at the beach, when I got so angry and called you the worst dog in the world?" A single, heavy tear rolled down Mark's cheek, splashing softly onto the dull golden coat as he squeezed his eyes tightly shut. "I need you to know that I was wrong. I was so incredibly wrong." Buster's cloudy brown eyes slowly flutter open one last time, gazing up at Mark with absolute, unwavering trust and quiet understanding. "You are the greatest dog that ever lived," Mark cried softly, his hands desperately clutching the thick fur. "You are the greatest dog, because every single day, no matter what happened, you loved us all so completely and unconditionally." He buried his face in the warmth of Buster's neck, letting out a shattered sob that echoed through the empty, melancholic room. "Thank you for choosing us," Mark whispered, his voice trembling with profound gratitude. "Thank you for everything, my beautiful boy." As the gentle, loving words washed over him, the elderly Labrador let out one final, incredibly peaceful sigh, his heavy body relaxing entirely. The rhythmic, shallow breathing that had anchored the room finally stopped, leaving behind an absolute, deafening stillness on the light grey rug. Buster was gone, leaving behind a heartbroken family and a house that would never quite feel the same without his chaotic, joyful presence. But as Mark held his best friend in his arms, crying in the dim light, he knew the beautiful memories they shared would never fade. For 13 years, Buster hadn't just been a pet, he had been the very best part of their lives, and his unconditional love would echo in their hearts forever.
For 13 years, Buster hadn't just been a pet, he had been the very best part of their lives, and his unconditional love would echo in their hearts forever.